Hart at the Hazbin Hotel, Chapter 34. Alistair attacked Hart out of rage. Everyone is furious about the fight that just happened. No one is happy with Alistair at all. But of course, even the radio demon soon comes to terms with what just happened and regrets everything. How will this affect things? Let's find out. Chapter 34. The Twinge of Regret. Third person point of view. Everyone acted at once when Husk ran up the steps and tackled Alistair down to the ground. In the process, he dropped Hart, who passed out and went limp in Alistair's tentacles. They uncurled from her, and she started to fall. Her body hit the floor. She rolled down a few steps, but Angel was right there when she was falling down the steps and caught her before she rolled down the rest. Angel held the limp girl in his arms a moment and looked down at her in shock. She was bleeding from the chest wound that Alistair had given her with his claws, and some of her old wounds had opened since they were not fully healed yet, mainly the ones that were on her back. Her transforming into her dragon demon form and then getting into a fight was not good. Angel was getting covered in her blood, but he was too shocked to notice or care. Charlie was behind Angel as he was running and was surprised when Hart was falling down the steps. Luckily, she was relieved as the spider demon was holding Hart. "Angel!" Charlie yelled. Angel jumped in surprise at his name and looked back at the Hell Princess. "We have to take her upstairs to Dr. Talon," Charlie said quickly and ran up next to Angel. "He should know what to do." Angel nodded and he picked the girl up into both sets of his arms and they ran to the elevator. Husk was holding down Alistair and had punched him in his face once. That seemed to kick him out of his angered state, and his breathing slowed as his eyes started to go back to normal. As the others ran past Husk and Alistair, Nifty stopped and stood with them. Charlie noticed and stopped for a moment to look back at the small demon. "Will you guys take care of him, please?" Charlie asked. "We will, don't worry," Nifty responded. Charlie then followed Angel and Vaggie into the elevator. Vaggie pressed the floor Dr. Talon was set up at. The doors closed, and they ascended. The princess felt nothing but worry, fear, and a slight bit of anger. She was wondering what the main cause of their fight was. That's what also confused her. They never fought. If they did, it was not this bad. This was too extreme and unnecessary. She was worried for Hart's safety, angry with Alistair to want to do this to her. That wasn't like him. He said he would never hurt her. Something in him must have really snapped. There had to be more to the story here. Charlie could take a guess as to why, but she didn't want to draw to conclusions just yet. Not until Hart was safe and would wake up to tell her tale. Vaggie was just as worried, but she was definitely more angry than anything. She wanted to take her spear and ram it into the deer demon's chest, right through his black, disgusting heart. But she knew better than to do that, at least for Hart's sake. She knew she wouldn't want to see him hurt. There was definitely something off, though. The two never fought that crazy. There was more than meets the eye here. Those are questions she had to save for when Hart woke up, though. Angel was just frozen in place almost as they rode in the elevator. He just stood looking down at Hart as she lay limp in his arms, still passed out. Luckily, she was still breathing after all that, but it looked like it was shallow. Angel felt bad for the girl. He'd never see her that angry, let alone seen Alistair that angry enough to hurt her. He never expected him to do a thing like that. Sure, Alistair was a heartless bastard sometimes, but this was Hart he was talking about. Alistair would never do this to her. The spider demon was actually worried, although it was also accompanied by a slight rage behind it. The elevator stopped as they arrived on the 5th floor, and they walked out quickly, and Charlie knocked on Dr. Talon's door rapidly. They waited a moment and the red wolf opened the door. When he opened it fully, he stood there in the doorway in shock. His mouth hung open a little. He dropped the papers he was holding in his hand. His glasses fell down his muzzle. Looking at the group in the hallway, his eyes cast down to the girl in Angel's arms. But what the hell happened? She was fine this morning when he talked to her. Something did not seem right. What the hell happened? Dr. Talon asked, with his mouth agape. Can we come in first, Doc? Angel quickly wondered in worry. Sure thing. Dr. Talon waved for them to come inside. Put her down on the table. The group walked in and Angel went over to the table and put Hart down, her limp limbs just doing what they pleased. Angel put her arms to her side and just looked down at her with sad eyes. Charlie stood by Dr. Talon by the doorway and started to explain what happened. Hart and Alistair had a fight, but it didn't end well. Alistair had his tentacles wrapped around her, and the one around her neck cut off her air and she passed out from it. She's also injured. We don't know what to do, so we brought her up to you, Charlie told him. Dr. Talon's face just slowly turned to one of pure sadness and shock as Charlie talked. That must not have been good. He sighed and then started to shake his head. I'll take care of her. I'm worried, though, they were fighting, and it turned aggressive as it did, Dr. Talon stated. Is that bad? Charlie wondered. I don't know yet. I need to examine her. I'll make sure to take care of her. She'll be okay, Dr. Talon said to her as he put a clawed hand onto her arm. Thank you, Charlie said as she had tears prick the corner of her eyes. Dr. Talon turned the other two in the room. I'm going to have to ask you guys to leave while I do this, he told them. Why? Vaggie asked with slight anger. I don't want to leave, Angel added. Please, I'm asking you nicely to please leave, Dr. Talon said with a stern tone. Everyone looked at each other for a moment. Can at least one of us stay? Charlie asked him. Dr. Talon looked at each of them and sighed. Fine. One of you may stay. I want to stay, Angel answered right away. Angel? Charlie questioned, looking at him with a raised eyebrow. Why? Vaggie wondered. 'Cause it'll be better if I'm here than out there. 'Cause if I see Al, you bet your sweet ass I'm kicking his, Angel said as he balled his hands into fists at his side and clenched his jaw. Charlie and Vaggie looked at each other, then looked to Angel and nodded. Will it be okay if we wait in the hallway? Charlie asked the wolf demon. You may. I'll come out when I'm done, Dr. Talon answered. Charlie and Vaggie headed out into the hallway, and they closed the door. Charlie looked one last time at Hart with a sad look on her face and closed the door all the way. Back downstairs, Husk and Nifty were trying to calm down Alistair. He seemed to get out of his blind, angered state. His breath had calmed and his eyes had gone back to normal. Alistair watched as Angel walked by with Hart in his arms, but his brain didn't process what was going on just yet. He was just looking off into space, up to the ceiling, trying to remember what had just happened, wondering how he got to the lobby and was not in his room. He remembered talking to Hart in his hotel room, but remembered he was getting angry with her. But after that, it was a blur. Husk and shook him as he was looking off into space. Al, you asshole, snap out of it! He yelled at him again. Alistair got kicked out of his thoughts and looked at the cat demon. Husker, what happened? You don't remember? Nifty asked him with a confused look. Alistair sat up as Husker got off of him slowly. He held his head a moment and put his claws through his red hair. Why couldn't he remember? Was he that knocked out and blinded by whatever happened? Whatever happened, though, it probably wasn't good. Then he remembered Angel walking by with Hart in his arms. Something happened to her, and it made him feel uneasy a moment. Part of him had a feeling he knew the answer already. I don't remember, Alistair finally answered, but I have an idea. Alistair looked away from the two friends and down at his lap. Husk then grabbed Alistair roughly by the scruff of his shirt and pulled the deer demon closer to look at him. You asshole! You almost killed Hart, you dumb shit! What the fuck is wrong with you? The cat demon just looked at him with so much anger in his eyes. Alistair probably would have had a hole in his head. Alistair was surprised by the action of Husk grabbing him and just looked at the drunk demon with wide eyes. He yelled at him, and after he was done, the events of what happened came back to him, hitting him like a train. The face of pure fear that he saw on Hart's face as she was in his tentacles' grasp was engraved into his mind. Oh, Lucifer, what had he done? Alistair didn't say anything as the full scene of their fight played again in his head. His eyes may have been looking at Husk, but they honestly were just lost. The last thing he remembered was the scream that Hart let out before Husker tackled him. The deer demon went limp in Husk's claws. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Husk shook him again. What the fuck happened? Husk yelled again. I don't know! Alistair answered quickly. I lost control! Husk let go of him and pushed him in the process, then stood up. Nifty looked at him with a sad look. I'm honestly surprised by this from you, Alistair. The deer demon looked over to the small girl. What? He heard her clearly. He was just confused. I never expected you to lose control to Hart, Nifty said softly. Alistair put his hands into fists and clenched his teeth together until it hurt. Damn it, he didn't expect himself to do it either. He had promised her he wouldn't lose control. He said he would be fine around her. He could imagine that she didn't want to see him. She would probably be angry at him. Probably most of all, saddened and maybe heartbroken. He fucked up. Fucked up bad. He had to see her, though. Alistair knew it wouldn't matter. He knew that even though he would apologize up and down, left and right, it wouldn't count for much. He had to see her. Alistair stood up from the floor. Husk turned around and looked at him. Where the fuck do you think you're going? I need to see Hart, Alistair answered him as he straightened out his shirt. Husk huffed at him. Good fucking luck. They were going to let you see her. Not after what you just did. He gave a growl. Alistair looked at the ground a moment. I have to try, he whispered. Nifty walked up next to Alistair. They went up to Dr. Talon, up on the 5th floor, she told him. Alistair nodded. Thanks, darling. Alistair left the two down in the lobby as he went up to the elevator and stepped inside and headed up. The trip to the elevator was an interesting one, as Alistair soon broke down into tears as soon as the doors closed. He was angry, mainly at himself. Fuck did he mess up. He hurt her. He hurt the one he loved. All because he was selfish, and he let his mind get clouded with anger. Plus, his damn instincts took over as well. The darkness got let out. It was because she was stubborn. That is what he loved about her, though. She always knew what she wanted and wouldn't give up. He liked her fiery spirit when it came to that. This baby stuff was just something different, though. It just made him uneasy, mainly because of the Valentino stuff that had happened. He gripped his ear fluff as the thoughts came back to him. No. Fuck Valentino. How dare he do this to us? Damn it! Alistair yelled and punched the elevator door hard. He just clenched his teeth and his breath was hard. Alistair tried to control himself and get his breathing back. The elevator stopped, tried to wipe his tears away that had spilled over his eyes and straightened himself up. He took another breath as the doors opened. He stepped out and automatically noticed Charlie and Vaggie out in the hallway. They were sitting on the ground across the way from the door. When Vaggie first saw Alistair walk out of the elevator, she quickly stood up, walked over to the deer demon, and punched him right across the face. Bastard! Why are you here? She yelled and demanded at him as Charlie walked up and took Vaggie by the arm so that she didn't punch him again. Alistair understood that no one was going to be friendly to him at the moment. He was expecting the punch. Whatever anger that someone had against him right now, he would gladly let them take it out on him. He deserved it all, after what he did. Vaggie, calm down, Charlie said to her girlfriend as she stood in between them. The moth girl growled, "Give me one fucking good reason to be calm around this asshole after what he just did to Hart." Vaggie threw him a middle finger. Charlie sighed. "I'm just upset as you, Vaggie. Just calm down right now. Please," Charlie said as she put her hands on Vaggie's shoulders. Vaggie gave a huff and went back to sit down. Charlie then turned around to face Alistair, who had turned his head back around to face the girls. A small red mark on his cheek from where Vaggie punched him. "Alistair, what are you doing up here?" Charlie asked him calmly. The deer didn't say anything at first as he looked down at the demon princess. I wanted to come check on Hart," he answered. "Why should you care?" Vaggie huffed from where she sat on the ground. That actually struck Alistair. He did truly care and was afraid for what he did to the girl. He honestly never meant to hurt Hart. Never did he want to hurt her. He broke this promise not to hurt her, and he had almost killed the girl. God, it haunted him now. The deer demon clenched his teeth and hissed as he balled his hands into fists, his claws digging into his palms. "I still care for her. What I did was a blind mistake. I was angered from the situation. She pushed me to my point," Alistair told them. "What would that be?" Charlie asked. Alistair squeezed his eyes shut a moment. The deer demon sighed. "I tried to convince her to get rid of the baby, but she was being stubborn. She started arguing with me, but my darkness and anger blinded me. I was going to force her by doing it myself," the deer demon admitted to them. He put his head down after he said that. "Al, I understand why you're angry about the baby stuff. I get it. But you shouldn't have acted the way you did," Charlie said softly. She had a sad look in her eyes while looking at him. "I can't help myself, though. Everything just all added up and crashed onto me at once. I tried to hold back all day, and even yesterday. But today, she pushed me. I know I shouldn't have done that. I never would have. I never wanted to hurt her. Never." Alistair then felt like he was going to cry again, but held it back. "Now I feel like I ruined everything." "You think?" Vaggie whispered, not looking at them. "That's up to Hart, Al," Charlie whispered. "I just want to talk with her." Alistair spoke and went to walk towards the door. "You can't!" Charlie stood in front of him. "Dr. Talon said no one was allowed in while he's working. He was nice enough to let Angel stay in there," she let him know. Alistair just stopped and looked at the door with a sigh. "Is it okay if I wait out here with you guys, at least?" Alistair wondered. "Yes." At the same time, Vaggie answered, "No." Charlie looked back at the girl. "Vaggie, you can see that he's upset. Let him stay." Vaggie huffed. "Fine, but once Lizzie gets here, she's going to rip you a new one," she said as she looked up at Alistair. The radio demon looked at the moth girl with wide eyes. "Lizzie is coming?" Charlie played with her fingers. "Well, yes, we had to tell her. She's Hart's sister after all." Alistair sighed. He leaned against the door and slid down until he was sitting. "Well, I will have my faith given to me once she gets here." Charlie looked at him, then back to Vaggie. She frowned and went back to the girl and sat down next to her. They were silent. Nothing could be heard in the hallway now. Nothing was even heard from behind the door of Dr. Talon's room. Then Alistair heard the elevator. It was moving. He looked at it. He felt worried, but he was expecting it was probably Lizzie, and the first thing she was going to do once she saw him was punch the hell out of him. He was honestly ready for it. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened. Alistair was correct to see Lizzie and Coda standing there. Lizzie already had a look that said she was pissed. They walked down to the elevator, and Lizzie's eyes went directly to Alistair. Her eyes shot daggers at him. "You!" she yelled and quickly walked up to the deer demon. "What the fuck did you do to my sister? She's only back for 1 day and you gonna do this? I can't leave her alone with you or something now?" She was closer to him, hovering over him where he sat. "You fucking asshole!" Lizzie then jumped at him and pushed him down onto the carpeted floor and started to punch the shit out of his face. "Lizzie!" Coda yelled in surprise when the wolf demon girl attacked the deer demon. Coda tried to reach and grab her arm and pull her off of him, but she ripped it away from his hands and continued to punch Alistair. Her knuckles hurt, but she honestly didn't care. This bastard was nothing but trouble for her poor sister, and she wanted to make him feel some sort of pain. "Lizzie, stop! Get off him!" Charlie cried. "That's enough!" Coda said more sternly this time, and wrapped his arms around hers and pulled her off Alistair. Lizzie was still flailing around, but Coda kept a tight hold on her. "Calm down," he said. Alistair was just breathing on the ground. His nose was bleeding from the girl's punches, and she even cut his lip a little. She punched him good under the eye. Already had a black and blue mark forming on his gray skin. Alistair just laid there. Charlie crawled over to him. "Al, are you okay?" He didn't say anything as he started laughing. Everyone looked at each other confused. Lizzie eventually stopped her squirming and calmed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh." The radio demon quickly apologized as he cut off the laugh. "I just needed that really bad." "I can give you more," Lizzie growled, but she's still restrained by her boyfriend. Alistair sat up and covered his bleeding nose with the sleeve of his long shirt. "Thank you, young lady. I was expecting this from you, and I appreciate it," he chuckled. Lizzie looked at him confused. "Wait, you wanted me to punch the shit out of you?" Alistair looked at her. "Yes, I deserved everything you just did," he answered and stood up. "Although, part of me wishes that your man wasn't here to stop you." Alistair quickly gestured to Coda. "I would have let you have at me. Kill me, if you wanted." Lizzie was just now looking at Alistair with wide eyes as Coda let her go. "Why would you want to die?" Charlie questioned. "Seems only fitting for what I did to my beloved." Alistair gave a chuckle. "I regret everything that happened, and I would take responsibility for my actions, whatever that be, seriously injured or just killed," he said to them and looked down at the ground. Everyone just looked at each other from his words. He honestly did feel bad about it all, and what he did. Death might have been extreme, but he would accept that. Before any other words could be said, the door opened. Everyone turned to see Dr. Talon taking his glasses off and cleaning them. He had a tiny bit of blood at the edge of his lab coat. He closed the door behind him. He looked up and saw everyone in the hallway. My. Looks like I have an audience now. I heard all this screaming out here as well." The red wolf demon looked around and stopped at Alistair, who still had a sleeve to his bloody nose. "You're actually here?" Dr. Talon said coldly. Alistair was taken aback by the scientist's tone of voice. He was not expecting that. He looked at Charlie for a moment, and she just shrugged. Dr. Talon cleared his throat and put his glasses back on, then looked at the group. "Well, I have good and bad news. Which would you like to hear?" "Good," the whole group said at once. But Alistair stayed silent. The wolf demon just smiled a little. "Well, she should be okay. Nothing major was damaged to her, thankfully. Her airway is fine and her breathing is normal. I cleaned her wounds and treated them. She should be left to heal." "What's the bad news, then?" Lizzie asked, and she grabbed Coda's hand for comfort. The scientist looked at them a moment and took a sigh. "It seems that the situation she was in put her under a lot of stress. And, put it short, her body didn't like that." He glared a moment at Alistair as he took a pause. "No. Was he about to say what they thought he was?" The wolf demon breathed out again. "Part of me expected it to happen eventually, but she seemed so strong about it all. Her body was coping with it. I was not expecting this, at least not this soon. It was only been 3 days at most. Although this situation didn't help her. He put his ears against his head. Her body rejected the baby, and she miscarried. The hallway went silent. For a moment, Alistair felt his heart sink. Part of him felt relief, but the other part of him felt regret wash over that. He slowly took his sleeve away from his nose and just let his arm fall to his side. He caused this, putting her under all the stress of everything lately. Between her weird scents and new ones, he wasn't used to it. All this stuff that happened with Valentino. His darkness was telling him bad thoughts, making him hate her more. He never wanted to hurt her. He never wanted to hate her. He forgave her. Whatever happened, happened. His mind wasn't his when they fought. Sure, it's what he wanted, for the child to be no more. But why did part of him feel sad about it all? He wanted to put the past behind them and just move forward. Of course, this was going to be hard. Hart was going to hate him for this. Everyone was going to hate him, and he accepted that. Wouldn't be the first time people would hate him for something dark he did. She was going to need time, and he would give her all the time in the world. She would want to be away from him, probably did not want to see him, let alone talk to him. That was going to be hard. Any apology he threw at her would be on deaf ears. Alistair just stood there, lost in thought, but Dr. Talon continued. You guys can head in and see her if you want. 2 at a time, please. I just don't want her overwhelmed if she wakes up. Angel is taking up his time right now. He took his glasses off and put them in his pocket. I would say we should move her to somewhere more comfortable before she wakes up. When you're all done seeing her, of course. Angel then walked out of the room. He looked up wide-eyed to see everyone there. He was surprised there was more people out there than he thought. His eyes then met with Alistair's, who was just staring at the floor. Angel growled and grabbed the dear demon by his shirt. Oh my God. I'll kick the shit out of you, but I see someone already has. I don't want to beat a dog while she's already down. Or should I say, shoot a deer who already been shot. Angel roughly let go of Alistair. I hope you're proud of yourself, you jagoff. Angel gave him one last glare before brushing past him and into the elevator. Everyone just looked at Alistair as he stood there. He said nothing. Did nothing. Just stood there, looking at the ground again. Charlie was going to reach out to him, but Vaggie grabbed Charlie's hand. The princess looked at the girl as she shook her head. Charlie just looked at him sadly as Vaggie just pushed them past Alistair and into the room. Alistair just put his back against the wall and slid down it to sit back on the ground. Charlie and Vaggie took about 5 minutes in the room and then went back to waiting in the hall again. Lizzie and Coda then went in and took just as much time. As they were in there, Dr. Talon stood in front of Alistair and crouched down. Mr. Alistair, do you want to go in and see her? Alistair said nothing at first, but then looked up at the wolf demon. Of course I do. Don't let him go in by himself, Vaggie quickly growled. Dr. Talon looked at her over his shoulder and put his finger to his lips to tell her to be quiet. I won't. I'll go in with him. He turned back to Alistair. When we're done, do you want to take her back? Alistair took a pause and looked up at the scientist a moment. I'll take her back to her room. Not mine. It would probably be for the best right now, Alistair answered softly. The wolf demon nodded. Sounds fair enough. He stood up. Lizzie and Coda then walked out of the room. The female gave Alistair a snarl before walking up to Charlie, and they started talking to each other. Alistair just ignored them, and he slowly stood from the ground and turned to the doorway. Dr. Talon was already standing there and just gave the deer demon a small smile and waved him inside. Alistair felt almost frozen in place a moment. His heart beat fast for a few moments as he stood there. He was almost afraid. He didn't know how she looked. He eventually tried to push all his feelings aside. and took a deep breath. He stood tall, slowly walking into the room. Dr. Town was already by the bed as he was writing on a clipboard he had. Damn man could not stop for one moment about his damn experiment. Just let the girl be for a moment. Alistair walked up to the bed and saw Hart laying there. She didn't seem out of the ordinary, thank Lucifer, although she did have fresh bandages wrapped around her wounds. She was naked again, since her clothes had been ripped when she transformed. He would make sure she was properly dressed. Didn't want her to be not decent. Alistair rested his hand on the table and next to her hand. He was going to grab it, but he didn't know if he should have. You can touch her. She shouldn't wake up, not any time soon anyway, Dr. Talon said to Alistair as he walked away to his desk. Alistair was hesitant, but did brush his fingers over the skin of her hand. For once in the last few days, he felt relieved to touch her skin again. He then gently laid his hand on top of hers. He was glad she was okay after their huge fight. Never again did he want to experience that. Alistair had so much to say to her, to apologize for, but he could not. He squeezed her hand a moment and then took his other hand and caressed her face gently with the back of his fingers, then laid his hand down on her cheek, gliding his thumb across her chin. You can take her down if you want. If you're uncomfortable up here with her, that is, Dr. Talon said as he walked back up beside Alistair. Are you sure? Alistair asked, just in case. The red wolf demon nodded. Go ahead, he said as he smiled. Thank you, Alistair whispered. For taking care of her, I mean. That's what I'm here for, Dr. Talon said. I'm sure she'll be back up here to see you, Alistair said to him. She said that no matter what happened, she'd still help me. So maybe my experiment isn't at a standstill just yet, Dr. Talon said with a small amount of hope. Well, definitely be on hiatus for now. I'm sure she won't be interested in anything physical till she's all healed, physically and mentally, Alistair told him. I understand that. I'm sure she'll be back to normal soon, Dr. Talon reassured him. Alistair just looked down at Hart with sad eyes. I hope so. Taking both his hands, Alistair went under Hart, one around her shoulders and the other under her knees. He lifted her off the table gently. She was almost like a rag doll in his arms. He brought her close to his body so that she wouldn't be dangling over his arms. Her head just rested against his chest. She just looked to be peaceful. Too bad he knew it wouldn't last for long. He walked out of the room and into the hallway. Almost everyone had left, besides Charlie. The demon princess was waiting in the hall across from the door. She looked up at Alistair. Everyone went down to the lobby. They figured they would wait till she woke up, but I wanted to accompany you. I hope that's all right. Alistair looked at her a moment and then nodded. I won't mind. Thanks, Al. Charlie smiled. Here, I'll get the elevator for you, Charlie said as she went up to the doors and pushed the button. Thank you, my charming belle, Alistair responded as he walked behind her. They stepped into the elevator and Charlie pressed the level button for him. Their ride was silent for the most part. Alistair looked down at Hart in his arms. He leaned his head down and placed his forehead against the top of her head, holding her tight. He never wanted to let go of her. Not again. Plus, who knows if she'll even let him hold her after this. Time would tell for sure. Alistair, Charlie started, kicking him from his thoughts. The dude even pulled his head up and looked over to the Hell Princess, her attention on her. Are you going to be okay? You know I'll be here for both of you guys. You know that, right? Charlie reminded him. Alistair gave a big smile. Thank you. I appreciate that. His smile lessened a moment. Just promise me you'll look after Hart when I'm not around. Charlie looked at him, confused. Alistair, what are you talking about? Alistair looked down at the girl in his arms. Her sweet, innocent face was just buried into him. Even when asleep, she was so cute. Given the circumstances, though, he was just worried. The door to the elevator opened, and they started walking down the hallway. Alistair decided to answer her. He took a breath. I'm going to leave her at the hotel while I stay at home. I know she probably doesn't want to see me, not after everything that happened. What I did to her, she won't forgive me. I doubt she'll want to talk to me. So, I'll stay away for as long as she wants me to. Charlie looked up sadly at the deer demon as they walked. She understood he was in pain. He blamed himself for what he did. Sure, it caused things to happen, but who knows how Heart will react when she wakes up. Are you sure that's what she wants? Charlie wondered. The radio demon took a pause. I don't know, he breathed out. Tell you what, why not stay till she wakes up and see how it goes from there, okay? Charlie suggested. Alistair wasn't sure about that. He then thought of something. Will you wait with me? That way she isn't alone with just me, he suggested. Charlie nodded. If that's what you want, then I will make it so. Charlie put a smile on her face. Thank you. Alistair returned the smile. The two got to Hart's old hotel room, and Charlie opened the door for Alistair. He walked in with the girl and headed to the bed. Charlie went and pulled the covers back on the bed, and Alistair gently laid her down into the sheets. He pulled the cover back up to cover her. Alistair leaned down and kissed the girl on the forehead. Charlie, Alistair started, not looking away from Hart's form in bed. Yes, Al, Charlie responded. Can you give her something else to wear for right now? He looked to the demon princess. Sorry about the last set you gave her. Charlie smiled and waved him off. Don't worry, Al. They're old clothes of mine, so don't worry. I can go try and find something else for her. She headed towards the door. I'll be right back, I promise. She then walked out of the door. Alistair watched Charlie walk out and just turned his attention back to Hart. To be honest, he just wanted a moment with Hart. Alone. The deer demon sat down on the bed next to the girl and put a hand to her cheek. My little wolf, I'm so sorry I did this to you. If you're awake, I tell you how much I love you. I know you wanted to hear me say it. I apologize for not telling you those words the last 2 days. I'm sorry for how I treated you. Alistair sighed. She wanted to hear him say that he still loved her, but his tongue felt like it was in a knot when she asked. She wanted his arms around her. God, he wanted to, but something was holding him back from doing so. He knew he should wait till she was awake to say all this, but to be honest with himself, he couldn't hold it back. I still love you so much. I hope you can forgive me. Eventually. He leaned down to place another kiss on her forehead, but he put his forehead against hers. I hope you can trust me again. I don't want to lose you this way. Alistair didn't want to admit as well, but he was excited for Dr. Talon's experiment. The circumstances of her losing the wretched child of Valentino's was a relief to him. He was sad to have put her through this, but he was glad. It just cleared the way for something greater, something that the two of them have talked about once before. Starting a family, in hell of all places. To think, he has something like this in his grasp now. Just the thought of it made him swell with joy. He just hoped she would give him the chance to have that opportunity still. He has never wanted anything more in his life with someone. Of course, he just hoped she would want to marry him. He then waited till Charlie returned with clothes, and they dressed her a moment so that she would be decent. You still want to stay, Al? Charlie asked to make sure. No, but I feel I should. Alistair looked to Hart in bed. I feel I at least owe her that. Charlie nodded. Then we will stay for as long as we need to, and I'll be here with you, Al. Alistair went to the other side of the bed and crawled into it. Being on top of the covers, he settled down next to Hart, who was still peacefully laying in bed. He reached under the covers and pulled her hand out to lay on top of the bed. He laced his fingers with hers and then held it tightly. His eyes just never left her form. Charlie just took the chair and sat beside the bed. And a look of worry still lay on them. Charlie was still angry at Alistair, but just the looks on his face, the way he was acting, it was so weird to her. Never has she seen him like this. He must really be in shock from everything that happened. He couldn't take back what he did, but he did show that he was sorry for it all. Charlie was certain that if he could take everything back, he would. He loved her. That was still certain. They both sat there, in silence. The only noise in the room was their breathing, and when Alistair would send out a wave of white noise every few minutes. He was just worried. He didn't know how she would react waking up. He had a deep feeling that things just weren't going to be the same. He glanced over and saw Charlie had eventually fallen asleep in the chair. As much as he was fighting back his own tiredness, he soon eventually felt his eyes get heavy, and he in fact fell asleep, his hand still holding hers. End of chapter 34. Well, that went fantastic. Maybe not. It took me a while to write this chapter back when I first started it. It was just weighing so much on me. But either way, I still hope you guys enjoyed it. So until next time, guys, I'll be seeing you around.